to introduce Elizabeth and Bob, who are here to speak to us tonight on a topic that we've never had presented to this group before. So I think it's great. I always think, new perspectives when dealing with prostate cancer is always so very helpful. So Elizabeth Shefrin has been working professionally as a visual artist and curator for 40 years, and her work has been shown throughout North America. She is particularly interested in the ways that art brings people together. Her international community art project, the Middle East Peace Quilt, toured North America for 10 years. Elizabeth has recently turned to book illustration and has 5 books to her credit. Embroidery Cancer Comic, published by Singing Dragon, is the first book she has written as well as illustrated. Bob Bosson is a musician and writer. Some of you will know Bob as the founder of the legendary Canadian folk music group String Band. Others may have seen Bob's performance or read his book called Davy the Punk about his father's life in Canada's gambling underworld in the 1930s. We are so happy that both of you are able to join us today. Please help me welcome Elizabeth and Bob.
Thank you for coming and welcome. As you heard, Bob and I are here today to talk about the project of mine making a comic out of our experience of his cancer. And I want to say right away, I'm not an artist, I'm not a medical person at all, and I have never had cancer myself, so I have no way of really knowing what that's like. So I'm not speaking for anybody with cancer or for the partners of anybody with cancer. This is just our story. I say just our story, but just may not be the right word because it was quite a complicated project to do from many points of view. And when someone that you love has a life-threatening illness, how do you make a piece of art out of that? How do you tell the story lightly without making light of the story? And how do you respect their boundaries and still maintain the artistic integrity of the piece? And how can the person, in this case Bob, how can the person the story is about contribute to the artistic process when that really centers on a life and death situation for them, a potentially life and death situation? So, this is how we did it. And I'll just mention at the beginning that over on the wall on your left, there's one of the project is a book as well as a series of quilts. So later, when we're done, we can have a look at the quilts and we'll have books at the back. But in the meantime, I'll just tell you that as soon as we learned that Bob had prostate cancer, we started making cancer jokes. And we just had to. And every time one of us said something that we laughed about, we said, that's got to go in the comic. Now at that point there was no comic, it was just a figment of our collective imagination. But I've been a fabric artist for a long time, and so eventually I got out my needle and thread because the whole comic is embroidered. That's a sample of it up here. And started, in fact, stitching the Embroidery Cancer Comic. I didn't have to make up much of the story because most of it really happened. We might, if you're good, we might tell you which parts didn't happen, but Bob's been very open about the cancer with me and many other people, and that's made my job much easier. And on the night of Bob's diagnosis, we made a decision to get married. And one of our wedding vows was to never lose our sense of humor. So I offer this project in partial fulfillment of my wedding vows.
I don't know if any of you, when you were considerably younger than you are now, thought about what it would be like to be the hero of a comic book. Well, I have realized that dream. And it's quite different than you thought it might be when you were 9 or 10. The book is actually Elizabeth's, although I certainly got to have a bit of my say, but she graciously gave 2 of us, Peter Black, who was my surgeon and oncologist, he's written an afterword, and there was a little space left, so she allowed me to write one as well, not as long as Peter's, but I just thought I'd read you a bit of what I said, because it kind of indicates what I've learned and how I think about my prostate cancer. It was 7 at night when the doctor called. He had my biopsy results. I had cancer. Prostate cancer, as you all know, is measured on the Gleason scale 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst. I was at 9. Until that night, I figured I was immortal. Not anymore. I'm going to die, probably of cancer, if something else doesn't get me first. You're going to die too. Neither of us knows when. The question is, what are we going to do about it? For me, the first thing was to find out all I could about what was after me. What we know about cancer is staggering. What we don't know is staggering. We know that cancer doesn't attack us, it is us. It has our DNA. Unchecked, it will kill us, just like some of the other things we do. You can't make war on cancer. You can't cut it out. You can only cut out a cancerous part of yourself. Cancer is something you live with. I suspect it is nature's way of nudging us along. Still, I'm all for stalling for time. There's a fraternity among men who live with prostate cancer. We tell each other intimate things. We talk about orgasms, erections, or lack of them. We talk about incontinence. We even talk about feelings. The veterans give the rookies advice, like pee before you make love. And because you live with cancer, whoever you live with lives with it too, as Elizabeth's comic shows so tenderly. For me, there is no one I would rather live with cancer with. No one. All right.
How it all began. How was the doctor?
He said my cholesterol was high. Oh, he also said my PSA was up.
Doesn't that have something to do with prostate cancer?
Could be.
Yikes, we're changing our diet. Most of you will recognize the initial panic that goes with the possible diagnosis of a serious medical condition. Maybe if I'm really, really good, I can make it go away. Oh, look, here's something on YouTube about somebody who cured herself eating only vegetables. I don't know, maybe if I wear warmer socks.
This group, if I was speaking to a different group, I might say more about the controversy around PSA tests. But just to echo what Leanne said, I mean, I was utterly asymptomatic, and I had just gotten to an age, and my old doctor said, "Oh, I want to get you one of the PSA tests," and I discovered my PSA was at 14, and so I'm kind of the poster child for PSA tests. I mean, I'm aware of the statistical arguments for not getting them, but I'm all for them.
Exploring alternatives. Bob consulted a chiropractor.
I don't feel cancer.
He consulted an acupuncturist.
No cancer in this meridian.
He consulted a psychic.
I don't sense cancer.
But get the biopsy. I want to say by way of apology that I have a great deal of respect for chiropractors and acupuncturists, maybe not quite so much for psychics. But some of them can be a little bit flaky.
I have to tell you this story. I actually did consult a psychic that a friend had recommended, a woman who is highly regarded in that field. And it was I don't know that it was a helpful visit, but it was a very interesting visit. She described my aura and told me that she thought I had been hung in a previous life, which I could have been. It's not utterly out of the question. But then at one point she sort of said, I'm getting a strong sense of cinnamon. Do you really like cinnamon? Do you eat a lot of cinnamon? I said, no, I mean, cinnamon's fine, but no, I don't have any special brief for cinnamon. And she sort of scratched her head and went on. Well, that was that. But then another of the alternate people I saw, I mean, I certainly saw people within the medical system, but I did see people with various other takes on it, was a woman who specializes in questions of diet and supplements and what have you. Again, very highly recommended by a friend. So I went to see Glenys, and Glenys had been an emergency room nurse for 25 years before she started doing this, so she was as down to earth as you get. But she had a method for diagnosis, in which she dowsed, and she basically questioned if there was anything needing attention in different body systems. And so, yes, and I've forgotten which system it was, and then what organ is it within the system? And she dowsed and said, the prostate. And then she actually got that there was a problem, I think it's called the ventricle. I hadn't even heard of a ventricle of the prostate. It was a little draining thing that her dowsing told her was plugged. And then she went on to, okay, what do you do for this? And kept dowsing down, and got to that it was something, there was a food kind of solution, and what was it? Went down the list, and finally said, yes, cinnamon. True story. But I got the surgery.
Okay, on to the next.
Yeah. Oh, am I saying something? Oh, right, sorry, I'm reading. Yeah, we're watching the movie, right. That's really funny. Reading. This is Dr. Brown. I'm Peter Black, actually. This is Dr. Brown. I'm afraid you have cancer.
After the phone call, we really did go back and we watched the rest of the movie. And then it was probably about an hour before we were able to talk about the diagnosis.
I'm really, do some of you know Peter Black? I know he's spoken here. He's at the Vancouver Prostate Center, but I mean, I'm delighted that he's been my guy, partially because he actually takes emails and responds to them very briefly, but he does. And in fact, he phoned, I think he was in Boston, it was midnight. He wanted us to get the results as soon as he got them. So it was great.
You have a choice.
You have a choice of surgery or radiation. I recommend surgery. I recommend radiation. I recommend a new pair of shoes.
Of course, that didn't really happen. I vividly remember us sitting in those two chairs at Dr. Peter Black's office, and I remember feeling resentful of every word he said. And of course, if he had, magically said, "Oh, we made a mistake, you don't really have cancer," I'm sure I would have thought he was a great guy. And in fact, he turned out to be a really lovely person, a good surgeon. He's been supportive of the book. He's, as Bob says, he answers all his questions, and I was just delighted when he agreed to write something for the comic. Oh, and I had a lot of fun doing this piece. And this piece is up as a, what's the quote that's up there? I had a lot of fun doing this because, well, there are lots and lots of oncologists around. A good shoemaker is really hard to find. surgery or radiation?
Surgery or radiation? Radiation or surgery? Surgery or radiation? So, radiation or surgery?
Hey, I'm a dog. The choice between surgery and radiation, which was of course Bob's decision, felt like it took over our lives and you know, that we were completely living in cancer land and nothing else was happening. And I haven't included any of our fights in the comic. They're a little bit too embarrassing. But we had some, particularly at that period, around that decision, I remember, we had some pretty good ones, but we won't talk about them.
Making that choice was a real interesting one. I mean, everyone makes a different one, and I'll just tell you how I came to it. There were kind of three things that pushed me towards surgery, or maybe four. But an old friend of mine who was a doctor, at one point I was talking about it with him, and he said, well, radiation's been around for, 100 years, and we've been sewing people up for several thousand when they first got stabbed by saber-toothed tigers, and I found there was something comforting in that. So that kind of was one of the things that directed me. And I did like the notion that with surgery, you get to find out after. I'm really a curious sort of guy. I mean, as opposed to radiation where you never really know what was in there. But and in fact, after the surgery, we discovered my prostate was, I think, 32% cancerous cells. So it was certainly the right thing to do. But the main thing that decided me was the radiation oncologist we talked to for a while, and I finally said to him at the end, if this was you, now the little pellets wasn't an option for what I had, and I said, what would you do? And he said, I'd have the surgery. And I thought, okay.
I wonder if it still works. While Bob was searching and researching the right decision, and very thoughtfully reading about it and so on, the doctors put him on anti-androgens, on the testosterone-inhibiting drugs, which of course had an effect on his sexual desire. So while we were waiting for the drugs to kick in, we did the only thing we could possibly do. We made love like rabbits. Bob takes his first testosterone blocking pill.
I wonder if it still works.
Let's find out.
Ooh. Any questions?
Come to bed with me. Come to bed with me.
Yeah, okay, I guess so.
We could look at that Victorian erotica book you like.
Oh, no, I'd rather read this book about cancer. Is that okay?
Sure, it's just fine. As it turns out, a lot of the jokes in this book are about sex, and it's because the surgery that Bob had included cutting of his erectile nerves as well as the effects of the anti-androgens. And very little of the cancer literature that I could lay my hands on, at least at that time, talked about this from the partner's point of view, or about its effect on the relationship. And yet that loss became a part of our daily lives.
I just want to point out the book about Victorian erotica is fiction. It's not a part of our She made that up.
What were you reading?
Oh, you know what? I do know what I was reading. It was Mukherjee's The Emperor of All Maladies, which is an amazing book about the history of cancer. I really recommend it. Even if you're not on anti-androgen therapy.
If you could sleep with any movie star, hey, if you could sleep with any movie star, who would you choose? Woof. Who really excites you? Well,
Juicy Ange?
oh, for goodness sakes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was weird watching somebody lose all interest in sex. For Bob, the sexuality just wasn't there. We'd watch movies and there'd be a steamy scene in the movie, and he'd say, and it would be partially a joke, but not entirely a joke. He'd say, "Why are those people lying down? Are they tired?" We tried to figure out a way to maintain intimacy and closeness without any possibility of sex, and it was an interesting project. And Bob didn't look at me with any desire anymore, and even my jokes about sex fell flat. And we couldn't even cuddle because one of the side effects of the drugs was the hot flashes. So as soon as we snuggled up together in bed, he'd have a hot flash, and we'd have to go to other sides of the bed. And so it was a challenge for me not to take this personally, and sometimes I did.
Yeah, I just say that, and again, it's probably most of the couples here have had some of this experience, but I mean, it wasn't. Somebody said to me that when they were on testosterone suppression therapy, it was as if they had a paper bag over their head and they simply didn't see women or people that would otherwise have been sexually attractive. And I didn't experience it that way, but it was sort of like NASCAR racing or stamp collecting. I mean, I understood there was a whole world there. It just was one that I wasn't particularly interested in at the time, which was harder for Elizabeth, who didn't have that same lack of interest.
Preparing for surgery. Please change into this gown and cap to prepare for surgery.
Thank you. Good morning, Bob. Okay, Doc, my life is in your hands.
Hey, you two have the same taste in hats. I was quite scared when Bob was going into surgery, but I was supposed to be the strong one and keep things up there. And I remember just thinking, make a joke, any joke, no matter how bad it is. Think of a joke. And I did, and it was a bad joke, and it didn't matter. We all laughed, and it actually broke the tension.
Yeah, I think certainly for me, one of the things that the prostate cancer brought on was I suddenly, well, as I said in that little postscript that I wrote, I suddenly became aware that I was mortal, which at some level from the time I was a kid on, I just didn't have any purchase for me, but there it is right in front of your eyes, and over, I guess the surgery was 4 years ago, something like that. But over the time leading up to it and since, I find it okay and a discipline and a challenge and an interesting thing to look at, to realize that I have a limited number of years and the reality of that is going to kick in sometime. I don't know when, but the next decade, certainly within the next two or almost certainly. And I feel, when there's a trick to preparing myself for that, at the same time as not becoming morbid and dominated by it. But I'm actually kind of grateful for the experience, because I'm 70 at this point, and it's kind of a good thing to take into this period of my life, I find. And so I think about, if there's old friends that I'd really like to see, I don't put it off quite so much. And there's all sorts of ramifications I'm just starting to get the feeling for. But it's not I don't find myself fearful at all. I find it kind of an interesting challenge, and an interesting, really drives home that I'm in a different part of my life at this point, and that's okay.
Oh, before we go to the last one, that was a pretty dumb joke. Okay, how are you and Bob doing with the cancer? How are you and Bob doing with the cancer? Okay, I guess. His surgery means no more erections. His drugs mean he's not interested in sex. We don't even flirt. It's hard not to take it personally. But you still love each other? Yes, we do. When before the book was in print, I was showing it to a number of people, and someone suggested, quite strongly suggested to me, since over a third of the strips, the comic strips, have something to do with sex, that I should put the word sex in the title. And he said, after all, sex sells books. And it's not that we don't want to sell books, but I said no right away, because the book is actually about relationship. It's not about sexuality, it's about relationship. And for me, that's what this strip addresses.
In talking about the cancer and the experience of the surgery and the anti-androgen therapy, I think Elizabeth came up against something in doing the book that I also came up against in conversations, and I started a little newsletter among good friends, because so many people were asking me the same things, that I started to write about it. But it's an interesting question to find what's too much information and what's not enough. And I know, I was quite keen that Elizabeth would put in the saying, Bob doesn't have erections. And there's a couple of other details in other parts, but there's others we didn't put in. I mean, it's not as if the experience doesn't have serious side effects and serious things. And I know what I came up with in the newsletters, I talked about a few, but not in great detail. But I would say, if you really want to know more, just call and we can talk. And I've really found a great thing, a great camaraderie among people who have had or are facing prostate cancer, many of whom are not as comfortable speaking publicly about it, but we live on Gabriola Island, and because I haven't been shy about talking about it, a fair number of people know that I've had it now. I have not infrequently somebody will call and say, I got something I want to talk to you about, can I come by? And I said, oh yeah, what is it? Well, I want to come over, and it's indeed that they've been diagnosed with prostate cancer. They're somewhere on the scale, but they really want to keep it private, which is fine. I don't have any trouble with that. But I certainly found great help and comfort in my conversations with other men. I have a musician friend I've worked with over the years who was about a year or two ahead of me, and he was quite candid with me about things he would experience, and then when I experienced it, I was, oh yeah, okay, that's what Bill had. And I find, because I'm a typical guy, and I don't tend to talk too much about personal things, or with my good friends. In many ways we don't. But with people I've met through the prostate cancer, it's just been great. And if any experience is the lesson of all this, I think it is to the extent one can, to talk with one's partner for sure, and to talk with other people, and I think it's great all around. Okay.
So, that's the end of the comic strips that we got to show. But just before we stop, before we stop, I just thought that you might be a little bit interested in how I made the book, and because it's kind of an unusual process. So I would find, I would work out a drawing I liked, and sometimes it just came out of my fingers, and sometimes Google Image is absolutely wonderful for trying to figure out how you hold a cup of coffee, or what something looks like. But anyway, I'd get a little sketch, and then I would blow it up to the size that I wanted it, which is the size they are on the quilts. And I would take the image to, I like to call it, my very sophisticated light table, otherwise known as the patio door. And I would trace it onto a piece of fabric. You can buy these magic pens that you draw with, and then you iron over them, and all the ink disappears. And they're another godsend. There I am tracing it. And then I took my needle and thread, and I embroidered all the lines and the words as well. And it was good because it was something I could carry around. There I am, so I'm working on it on a train. And I just want to finish by saying that a few months after Bob's cancer surgery, I was in quite a serious accident, and so our roles were reversed, and he was able to really pay attention and look after me as I recovered from the accident. And it's given me an appreciation an appreciation of mortality, an appreciation of life, and an appreciation of our relationship. How that, whatever happens, however long it lasts, that, we'll kind of go rambling through life together. And there we are, rambling through life together. Thank you. And we're happy to take questions. And please speak up because we both have a little bit of trouble.
I would say that my situation is something like yours. I had same operation, medical surgery, when I was 76, and that was 20 years ago. And my PSA was low, but it was my Gleason score was 9, and because of this anti-androgen therapy, I certainly lost, and the surgery, I lost my libido, but I was lucky in a way that I didn't suffer from hot flashes, so that made a difference. So, but our sex life did change dramatically, but still, the love and
the surgeon in the hospital had said, don't lift anything that's more than 5 pounds. And so we went home, and immediately he's doing things like lifting the frying pan that's full of food, and the cast iron frying pan and this sort of thing, and carrying around this bag with books and I don't know what in it, but more like 20 than 5 pounds. I'm saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, and he's ignoring me. And then we went to the doctor. This is maybe 2 weeks after the surgery. We went to the doctor, and I said to the doctor, would you mind lifting Bob's bag? And so he picked up the bag, and he shook his head, and he said to me, give him his empty bag to carry. And he said to Bob, just do what she tells you.
This actually, I think, would have made a great strip. It happened after the book was pretty much done, but after the comic was pretty much done. But I did have cancer cancer cells in a number of the lymph nodes, and So there seemed to be a pretty decent chance that after the surgery and after the anti-androgen therapy, the cancer cells might start to regroup. And indeed, initially after all of that, my PSA was at 0, or it was, unreadable, but very slowly it started to come back up, and in fact it's now up to 0.5, which of course is very, very low, but it has been doubling. And Peter, Dr. Black, and the people I work with, I mean, basically they don't do anything at this stage and wait till the PSA gets up to 4.5, or I can't remember the exact number, because they don't want to do the anti-androgen therapy too often, too regularly. So I'm in this little hiatus where the cancer is growing, but there's not any particular therapies that I was aware of. But I was aware that there's a fair literature about the effects of cannabis on cancer, particularly on prostate cancer. There have been a couple of studies of CBD, cannabidiol, THC and cannabidiol are the two main molecules in cannabis. And there were a couple of studies, one on rats, one in vitro, that seemed to indicate there might be something there. And I thought, okay, what the heck, Gabriel Island, it's not hard to come up with. And I found someone who made an oil, and so I took the oil, and very ginger, took a very small amount, did that for a few months, had a PSA test, didn't make a damn bit of difference. So then I said, okay, some of the people say you need some of the THC, because I had this, it was a CBD oil that I got, because I didn't want to be stoned particularly day after day. But I found, okay, we'll put some THC in, I took a bit more. It was an interesting afternoon. The phone rang, and it was the captain of my ball team saying, "We've got a makeup game tonight, you gotta be there." I think that would have been a great strip. For those who are baseball, if you're a baseball fan, I can explain this after to anyone else who wants to know. The team started calling me Doc Ellis. But Doc Ellis was this pitcher. In 1974, he threw a no-hitter on LSD. No one could hit the ball, but he also walked, I think it was 12 people. And he commented years later, he said, nobody knew where the ball was going, including me.